The very last section of your test told you that you were solving quadratics by factoring. So if we look at the directions, I did specifically tell you that you are solving, and I even reminded you to check for a GCF. So solve, we know that our answer is always going to be x equals and x equals. Most of the time we get two answers, right? So we're going to solve this by factoring. So our first step is it equal to 0? So if we look at number 20, 3x squared minus 18x equals 0, it is equal to 0, so we're good. We can move on to step 2, which is check for a GCF. So when we look at 3x squared minus 18x, those both have a 3x that we can factor out. A lot of you guys get tripped up because you're looking for 3 terms. It's okay right now that it doesn't have 3 terms because I'm just going to factor out the GCF first and then I'll go from there. Alright, I don't worry about how many terms it is until I check for a GCF first. So I'm going to take out that 3x and I'm left with x minus 6. And I'm going to bring down my equals 0. After we check for a GCF, we just need to factor. So we need to figure out, okay, do I have 4 terms? Do I have 3 terms? Do I have 2 terms? Well, when I look at this, I actually don't have to worry about factoring at all because I don't have an x squared anymore. We only factor if we have x squared or x to the third or something along those lines. So I'm actually done with the factoring part. My last step then is that I'm going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. And you should have all of this in your notes already. The solving part starts on page 22 of your packet, so you should have all of these steps written down already. But, just in case, I'm doing them here. So set each factor equals to 0 means take each piece, 3x equals 0, x minus 6 equals 0. And now this is just simple, 1 step, maybe 2 step, depending on the problem, equations that you're going to have to solve. So if I have 3 times x equals 0, I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. And 0 divided by 3, you guys, is 0. You can use your calculator to double check. And then in this case, I need to add 6 to get the x by itself. So I get x equals 6. Those are my 2 answers. Number 21 is very similar, so I am not going to do it. But if you will go to the next page, please, and take a look at let's do number 25. So number 25, we're going to ask ourselves, is it equal to 0? Yes, it is. We're good. It's equal to 0. Check. Alright, then we're going to check for a GCF. Well, x squared minus 4, there's no GCF there, so I'm good. Now I'm going to factor. Well, when I look at this, x squared minus 4, I notice that it still has the x squared because there was no GCF like there was in number 20 that we just did. But it's missing the middle term. So anytime you have an x squared and then just a constant, you're going to need to put in a 0x. So x squared plus 0x minus 4 equals 0. Technically, 0x doesn't need to be there, right? I didn't change the problem at all. But now this looks an awful lot like the factoring that you've already done. So we're going to multiply the first and the last term to figure out our m. So we need to multiply to negative 4, and we need to add to 0. Anytime we have to add to 0, when we've got that 0x in the middle, we get to actually take a little bit of a shortcut to find our numbers. So, since I'm multiplying to a negative number, I know that my 2 numbers have to be one positive number and one negative number. And since I'm adding to 0, I know they have to be the same number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the square root of the number I'm trying to multiply to, but I'm going to ignore the negative sign for a second. So I'm just going to do the square root of 4, which if you already know it, that's awesome. But just in case, we're going to check, and it's 2. That means those are my numbers, and I can double check with my calculator. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. 2 plus negative 2 is 0. I know that those are the numbers that I want. So from here, you can either do the box method, or you can do the splitting the middle. So I'm going to show the splitting the middle on here first. So I get x squared and negative 4, those drop down. And then I have a plus 2x and a minus 2x. And then technically the equals 0 follows along as well. But now I have 4 terms. Now it looks like my factoring by grouping. So I can factor by grouping. I'm going to take out the GCF of the first 2, which is x, and I'm left with x plus 2. And then my GCF of negative 2x and negative 4, well, that's got to be a negative 2. So I have a negative 2 on the outside, and then an x plus 2 on the inside. And if I look, x plus 2 matches there, so that's good. I'm going to take that and write it once. And then I'm going to take my leftovers, x minus 2, and equals 0. Now that it's factored, I'm going to set them equal to 0 and solve. So I'm going to do x plus 2 equals 0, and I'm going to do x minus 2 equals 0. And now I'm going to solve both of those. To get x alone here, I'm going to subtract 2, so I get x equals negative 2. And to get x alone on the other one, I'm going to add 2, so I get x equals positive 2. Those are my answers there if I were going to do splitting the middle. If you were going to do the box, you make your boxes, you factor out the same, you'd still get to the same answer. You would get to here after your boxes, and then you set each piece equal to 0 and solve. The only difference between that and numbers 26 and 27 is they're not equal to 0 yet. So taking a look at number 26, my first step is it equal to 0? And in this case, it's not. I want to take this 10 and turn it into a 0. So I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. So I get 6x squared plus 17x minus 10 equals 0. I can't combine any of these because they're not like terms, but my goal was to get a 0 there, and now I got it. Now I can factor like normal. I check for a GCF, then I do my MA, I get my factors, and I set them equal to 0. Again, if you need help with the factoring, don't forget there's those other 2 videos on factor by splitting the middle and then the box method. So whichever method you prefer, you can go ahead and watch those videos. But the only difference between factoring and solving is making sure it's equal to 0 first, and then finding your solutions last. The middle part is all still the same. The solving practice is in your packet on pages 22 to 24.